It usually starts on a night that wasn't supposed to be long. Just a quick scroll before sleep, a last check just in case. The kind of habit your hands repeat even when your mind is already tired. The room is half dark, the hallway light sneaking in under the door, and the only real brightness comes from the small rectangle in your hand. You notice your eyes sting a little, but you don't put the phone down. A video ends. Another one loads on its own. And you let it. You weren't really choosing what to watch anymore. Things were just arriving. There's a faint noise of distant traffic outside. Maybe a motorcycle passing, and for a second you realize you're not actually listening to any of it. Your thumb opens the same app again without thinking, even though it was already open. You scroll past faces, headlines, people's lives compressed into 30 seconds. Non deles exatamente importantes. Mas também não totalmente ignoráveis. Somewhere between one clip and the next, you feel a small wave of irritation at how tired you are. Not physically, exactly, but mentally frayed, like your thoughts are loose threads. The pillow under your head is warm on one side, slightly cold on the other, and your shoulders feel heavier than the rest of your body. You tell yourself you'll stop after just one more. But your finger doesn't really believe you. You're not even sure what you're looking for anymore. Information, comfort, distraction, or just something to fill the quiet. I don't think this kind of exhaustion always looks dramatic from the outside. Sometimes it's just a person lying in bed in a quiet apartment, phone glow on their face, doing nothing obviously important and still feeling strangely worn out inside. It's that sense of having spent the whole day with noise in your mind. And yet, if someone asked what you did, you wouldn't know how to answer. Maybe you know this feeling too. Realizing it's late, that you're tired, that your brain feels like it has been on for hours longer than it was supposed to be. And still, you hesitate before turning the screen off. Not because the content is so good, but because the silence on the other side of that black screen feels heavier than the exhaustion you're already carrying. There's a particular kind of night when you realize you've been scrolling for so long that the videos start to blur together. You remember the first 3 or 4 clips, maybe? And then it all dissolves into a vague sensation of having seen too much. You're still lying in the same position, your head pressed into the pillow, shoulders sinking slightly into the mattress. But your mind feels like it's been running laps around something it never quite reaches. You open your notifications without really caring what's there. A message from hours ago, a random email, some app reminding you of something you don't even want to think about right now. You clear a few, leave others, then tap back into the feed, almost automatically. Like your fingers know the path better than your actual intentions. It doesn't feel like a conscious decision. It feels like muscle memory. Maybe you've noticed this too. Sometimes you unlock your phone, and for a second, you can't remember why. There's this tiny blank space, half a second of, what was I gonna do? And then you just open whatever app sits closest to your thumb. By the time you realize you didn't actually need to check anything, something new is already playing, and it feels easier to just stay there than to close it and face the empty screen. Your eyes are tired in that specific way that comes from staring at light in a dark room. Not a sharp pain, more like a dull pressure, as if your brain is leaning forward through your face. You shift a little, adjust the blanket that got twisted around your legs, Promise yourself again that you'll stop after this video or the next one, or maybe at the end of the next recommended chain. The promise doesn't feel like a lie, but it also doesn't feel like something you're fully in charge of. There's a strange guilt that shows up here. Not big enough to call shame, not dramatic enough to be a crisis, but a quiet sense that you are wasting something. Time, attention, maybe yourself. You tell yourself you're just resting, that your brain's too tired for anything serious anyway. And yet the rest you're getting doesn't feel like rest. It feels like being plugged into a socket that never actually charges you. Just keeps the device from dying. During the day, if someone asked how you're doing, you might say you're fine, just tired. It's an easy phrase. It fits in small talk. It doesn't invite too many questions. But there's another layer that doesn't fit into those two words. This quiet, ongoing heaviness in your mind. Like you've been carrying a backpack full of small, meaningless objects all day. Nothing heavy enough on its own to justify how exhausted you feel. But together, somehow, they drag. You might notice how even small tasks start to feel strangely big. Answering a simple message, opening an email, making a phone call you've been delaying. None of it is objectively huge, but your mind reacts as if each one were another tab you're being forced to open. Meanwhile, the feed never demands a decision from you. It just keeps going. And in a way, that's the most comfortable part. You don't have to choose anything. You only have to not look away. There's a moment sometimes when you pause the video and the room feels louder in its silence than it did with sound. You hear the refrigerator in the kitchen, the slight hum of some distant appliance, maybe the faint echo of a car passing in the street below. For 3 seconds, you stay there, phone resting on your chest, eyes unfocused on the ceiling, and then your hand reaches for the screen again. Not because you're curious, but because the quiet feels like it might ask questions you don't want to answer tonight. If you recognize yourself in any of this, you're not alone. A lot of people are lying in their own dark rooms, under their own tangled blankets, watching their own endless streams of just one more thing, while wondering why they feel so depleted. It's not that every video is bad or every app is evil. It's that somewhere along the way, the line between resting and numbing blurred so slowly we barely noticed. And now, many of us are left with this confusing mix of being overstimulated and undernourished at the same time. Mentally full, but not really fed. There's a point where the tiredness stops feeling like something that will disappear after one good night of sleep. It starts to feel more like a background setting, a default mode your mind wakes up into every day. You can function, you can answer messages, you can show up where you're supposed to be, but there's this quiet drag underneath everything, like you're walking through water instead of air. Sometimes you try to explain it to yourself in simple terms. It's just stress. It's too much work. It's because I'm not sleeping well. All of those might be true, at least a little, but they never seem to fully capture what's going on. Because even on days when nothing particularly terrible happens, even when the to-do list is manageable, there's still this strange sense of mental fatigue sitting in the background, almost like your mind never really returns to a resting state. It just moves between different levels of being on. Someone, long before phones and feeds and endless timelines. Notice that human beings have a way of running away from themselves when life gets too noisy. Not by physically going somewhere else, but by filling every empty inner space with something: tasks, conversations, entertainment, any distraction that can keep us from sitting alone with whatever might surface in the quiet. Back then, the noise was different. Social expectations, rigid routines, external pressures. Now, the noise fits in your hand, in your pocket, on your bedside table, ready to light up your face every time you feel a flicker of discomfort. It's not just that the world asks a lot from you. It's that even when the world isn't actively asking, there's still an invitation, almost a demand, to stay connected, updated, reachable, responsive. You might notice how hard it is to simply close everything and disappear for a few hours, not because anyone will punish you, but because some part of you feels uneasy about missing something. As if staying mentally online were a strange obligation you never consciously agreed to, but somehow follow anyway. In nights like the one we're talking about, the exhaustion doesn't come only from what you did today. It also comes from everything you didn't allow yourself to stop doing inside your own head. You replay conversations, scroll past people's lives, compare, measure, imagine, worry, predict, sometimes all in the span of a few minutes, with each new piece of content pulling a different string in you. No wonder your mind feels worn out. It hasn't had a real moment of being with itself without an audience in a long time. There's a kind of freedom that looks appealing from the outside. The freedom to see anything, know anything, access anything at any hour. But inside, it can slowly turn into something else. The inability to bear the moments when nothing is happening. When you finally close your eyes in the dark room, without sound, without light, you might feel a small wave of unease rise up. Not because something terrible is waiting, but because you're not used to being there with yourself without distraction. And so, the easiest way to quiet that unease is to turn the screen back on. It's a quiet bargain you make with yourself. I'll just keep my mind busy so it doesn't have to feel too much. On the surface, it works. You don't have to sit in raw silence. You don't have to meet certain thoughts face to face. But the cost shows up as this strange, persistent tiredness. A sense that your inner life is always slightly out of sync, as if your mind lives in a constant low-level flight from something unnamed. You may not have words for it, but your nervous system feels it. Always alert, rarely at ease, even in bed, even alone. I don't think this is about blaming you for being weak or undisciplined. If anything, it's a very human response to a world that offers escape in every spare second. When avoiding yourself becomes so easy, doing the opposite, staying, listening, slowing down, starts to feel unnatural, almost uncomfortable. And yet, some part of you might already suspect that this endless mental running is exactly what makes everything feel so exhausting, even on days when, technically, you didn't do that much. Maybe tired isn't even the right word for what you've been feeling. Tired sounds like something a weekend could fix, or a vacation, or a slightly better schedule. What sits in you feels closer to a kind of quiet emptiness, like you've been pouring your attention into so many small things that there's not much left for anything that actually matters. Not a big crisis, not a breakdown, just this ongoing sense that your inner life is thinner than it used to be. There are moments when you catch yourself watching your own behavior from a distance, almost like you're observing a stranger. You see your hand reaching for the phone again, opening the same app again, scrolling through the same kind of content again. And part of you thinks, why am I doing this? But the question doesn't really land. It drifts away as another video starts. You end up living as if you're half inside your body and half outside, a spectator of your own habits. Sometimes it feels like your days are made of fragments that never quite add up. A bit of work here, a message there, a burst of scrolling, a half-hearted conversation, a few minutes of something that almost feels meaningful, and then suddenly it's night again. You know you were awake the whole time, but it doesn't feel like you were really present for most of it. It's as if your life is happening in front of you, and you're always slightly delayed catching up through highlights and memories instead of being fully there. It's strange how easy it is to stay close to other people's lives and far from your own at the same time. You know who got engaged, who moved, who changed jobs, who is trying a new hobby, all through small windows of curated moments. Meanwhile, when you try to think about what's actually happening inside you, the answer comes back blurry. You can name events, but not always emotions. You can describe your schedule, but not always your state. There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't look like being physically alone. It shows up when you're surrounded by constant contact, yet feel like nobody really sees what's going on in you, partly because you don't fully see it either. You might have friends, chats, group conversations, but when the light from the screen fades, there's a subtle sense that you've been skimming the surface of connection without sinking into it. And in that gap, the exhaustion grows. Because pretending you're fine costs energy too. Maybe this is where the fear of silence comes in. Silence is not just the absence of noise. It's the place where your own thoughts become louder. If you've been avoiding them for a long time, of course that space feels threatening. Closing the apps doesn't just end the stream of content. It also removes the buffer between you and whatever might rise up from inside. On some nights, you might experiment with putting the phone face down, just for a moment. You stare at the ceiling. Notice a small crack in the paint you'd never seen before. Hear the soft hum of the building, the faint echo of someone closing the door down the hallway. For a brief second, something in you relaxes, and then another part tightens, worried about what might come if you stay here too long. Your hand moves almost on its own, flipping the phone back, as if you were rescuing yourself from your own interior. It's a strange paradox. The more you try to escape the weight of your inner world by filling every gap with stimulation, the heavier everything starts to feel. Your mind becomes a place you're always managing, never resting in. And maybe that's the most exhausting part. Not the tasks, not the responsibilities, but this constant, subtle effort to stay away from yourself, even in the quietest moments of the night. I don't have a neat label for this. And maybe you don't either. It might be anxiety or numbness or burnout or something that doesn't fit in any easy category. What matters is that somewhere beneath the endless scroll and the auto-playing videos, there is a human being who is not just lazy or weak, but quietly overwhelmed by how hard it has become to simply exist with their own mind. And if that's you, then this exhaustion isn't proof that you're failing. It might be evidence that you've been carrying more inner distance from yourself than any one person was meant to hold alone. There's a particular stillness that only appears when the feed finally pauses. Not full silence, and the world never really goes that far, but a softer layer of sound underneath everything. The low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the faint whir of a fan, a car rolling past outside, Someone closing a door 2 floors below. Your room, which felt invisible a few minutes ago, suddenly becomes very present. The shape of the curtain, the pile of clothes on the chair, the glass of water on the nightstand with fingerprints near the rim. Your phone rests on your chest or beside your pillow. The screen finally dark. Your eyes take a moment to adjust. They feel a little dry, as if they've been staring through things instead of at them. There's a slight pressure between your eyebrows where your face has been unconsciously tensed for hours. You notice the blankets are twisted, one leg half uncovered, your toes pressing against a cooler patch of sheet. For the first time in a while, there is nothing moving in front of you. No new face, no headline, no punchline, no background music telling you what emotion to feel next. It's just you. You're breathing. And the quiet weight of the day sitting somewhere between your chest and your throat. It's strange how unfamiliar this can feel, as if being alone with your own mind were a foreign country you haven't visited in years. Thoughts don't rush in all at once. They arrive in small, hesitant pieces. You remember something you didn't answer earlier, a task you postponed, a comment someone made that stayed with you longer than it should. Then your mind drifts to something completely different. A song stuck in your head, a scene from a show, an image from some random video. Everything blends together into a soft, unfocused fog of impressions. There's a moment when you realize how rarely you let your mind wander without a soundtrack. When was the last time you lay like this, in a quiet room, without trying to make the silence useful? Not turning it into meditation, not forcing it into productivity, just letting it be what it is. A small pocket of life where nothing needs to happen. The idea feels almost irresponsible, as if simply existing without input were something you had to justify. Someone, long before any of this, noticed how frightened we can become of our own company. Not because we are terrible, but because being with ourselves means facing questions that don't have quick answers. What am I doing with my life? Why do I feel this way? What am I avoiding? These are not questions you can swipe away with your thumb, and that alone makes them heavier than most content you consume. You shift your body slightly, trying to find a more comfortable position. The mattress dips under your weight, a small creak from the bed frame, the fabric of your shirt tugging against your shoulder. You become aware of your breathing, a bit shallow at first, then slowly deeper as you pay attention. For a few breaths, your mind and your body seem to sync up in a way they haven't for most of the day. Nothing dramatic happens. There's no sudden revelation, no cinematic breakthrough, no instant peace, just a soft noticing. The way your chest rises and falls, the way your jaw loosens when you remember to unclench it, the way your hands relax when they're not holding anything. For a brief moment, the exhaustion feels less like a personal failure and more like a natural response to a life that has given you very little real quiet. You might not stay here for long. Maybe in a minute you'll tap the screen again, let the light flood back in, invite the noise to cover this fragile stillness. But even if you do, something has already shifted a little. You've tasted, however briefly, what it feels like to be present in your own room, in your own body, without filling every second with something else. And that tiny taste of stillness can linger, even if the rest of the night doesn't go exactly the way you wish it would. If you stay in that almost quiet a little longer, something subtle begins to show itself. Not a grand insight, just a small recognition. You have been asking your mind to live in a state of constant readiness, ready to react, to respond, to laugh, to be outraged, to care, to scroll, to move on. Even in this room, even in this bed, there is a part of you still waiting for the next thing to appear. It's easy from the outside to treat this as a matter of discipline, as if you were simply too weak to put the phone down, too unfocused to resist the next notification. But from the inside, it feels different. It feels like trying to stand still on a moving walkway. The ground itself keeps pulling you forward even when you're tired, even when you've had enough. Someone, long before these screens, had already noticed how we tend to trade inner freedom for a quieter kind of captivity. When it becomes uncomfortable to sit with our own uncertainties, we look for structures, distractions, routines that tell us who to be and what to feel. Now, those structures live in your feed. Endless examples of how other people live, how they cope, how they present themselves. It's not that you consciously decide to copy them, but the comparison seeps in anyway, drop by drop, until your own life feels strangely thin beside the highlight reels. Maybe that's part of the exhaustion too. Not just the noise, but the quiet sense that you're always a little behind some invisible standard. Not productive enough, not informed enough, not interesting enough, not caught up enough. Even rest can start to feel like a failure when the world keeps showing you what you could be doing instead. So you keep your mind busy, if only to avoid the discomfort of feeling like you are falling short. In this late night room, though, with the hallway light slipping under the door and the phone resting silently beside you, there is no audience, no algorithm rating your choices, no invisible scoreboard tracking your productivity. It's just you, your tired nervous system, and the quiet fact that you have been carrying more than you admit to others, maybe even to yourself. The exhaustion begins to look less like a flaw and more like a signal. Something inside you has been saying, "This is too much," for a long time. You might not be ready to change anything tonight. Maybe all you can do is lie there, feeling the weight of your own thoughts, noticing how often your hand itches to reach for the screen again. That's still a kind of awareness. It means there is at least one part of you that is watching, that is capable of seeing the pattern instead of just living inside it. If you let that part of you breathe for a moment, you might realize you're not the only one who feels this way. There are countless other rooms, countless other beds, countless other people staring at their ceilings, wondering why their minds feel worn out even on days that look ordinary from the outside. Some of them have never put this feeling into words. Some of them think they're just bad at life, when in reality, they're just tired of always having to run away from themselves. Maybe tonight is not about fixing anything. Maybe it's about not abandoning yourself just for a few more minutes. Staying with your own mind long enough to admit that this is hard, that you are not weak for being overwhelmed, that existing in a constant stream of stimulation would tire anyone. Letting that truth land can be a kind of companionship in itself, a quiet reminder that you don't have to be perfectly strong to deserve rest. If you do pick up the phone again, it doesn't erase this moment. You can come back to it tomorrow night or some other night, whenever the exhaustion feels louder than usual. The goal isn't to become someone who never escapes. It's to gently remember that you also have the option to stay. even for a little while. Even just long enough to notice that beneath all the noise, there is still a person here, trying to live, trying to understand, trying not to disappear entirely from themselves. Maybe tonight doesn't need a big promise. Not, from now on, I'll change everything. Not, this was the last time I let the night slip away like this. Those sentences are heavy. They ask for a version of you that has energy you don't have right now. And honestly, carrying one more expectation might be the last thing your mind needs. What if for tonight, the only decision is smaller than that? Not quitting every habit, not redesigning your whole life, just not letting the next video autoplay, letting the screen stop where it is. Even if it feels a little awkward at first, maybe you still keep the phone near you, but you give your eyes and your thoughts a chance to land somewhere that isn't constantly moving. You've done enough today. Even if your brain tries to argue, listing all the things you didn't do, all the tasks that remain, all the ways you think you fell short, you still carried yourself through another day of being on more than anyone was meant to be. That alone is effort. It counts. Even if there's no notification that says you made it through the day or you're allowed to rest now. You could try something very small, almost invisible from the outside. Turn the brightness down a little more. Place the phone face down on the nightstand so the glow doesn't call you back as easily. Let your hand rest on the blanket instead of on the screen. Feel the fabric under your fingers. Notice the simple weight of your own body supported by the bed. If your mind keeps spinning, that doesn't mean you're doing this wrong. Brains don't slow down on command just because we decide they should. They need time and patience, and the kind of gentle repetition that doesn't come naturally in a world of instant responses. You can let your thoughts wander without needing to follow every single one of them to the end. Maybe nothing needs fixing tonight. Maybe noticing the tiredness, really noticing it, without running from it immediately, is already more than you usually allow yourself to do. A quiet acknowledgement that says, yes, this is heavy for me, instead of, I should be handling this better. Sometimes that shift alone makes the room feel a little less hostile, a little more like a place where you're allowed to be exactly as you are. If you find yourself coming back to nights like this, you could treat this video or this kind of space as a small anchor. Not a cure, not a solution, but a reminder that there is another pace available, even if you only touch it for a few minutes. A place where you don't have to perform being okay, or productive, or endlessly resilient. Where being tired doesn't disqualify you from kindness, especially your own. At some point, you'll close your eyes. Maybe your thoughts will keep wandering for a while. Maybe sleep will take longer than you'd like. But somewhere in between, your body will do what it has always tried to do. Protect you the best way it can, even when you push it past its limits. Letting it rest, even imperfectly, is a way of meeting it halfway. And if, on another night, you end up here again, phone in hand, brain buzzing, heart a little heavier than you admit, you'll already know this. You're not the only one who feels this kind of exhaustion. You're not strange for struggling with it. You're not broken for needing softer spaces like this. Sometimes being understood, even quietly, is enough to make the weight you carry feel just a little less lonely.